The Portuguese alphabet has 26 letters, which are the same letters as in English. Because Portuguese and its alphabet are more methodical, they consist of phonetic rules, but the pronunciation is different, because Portuguese is a Romance language. The letters, their pronunciations, and spellings look like this: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Unlike English, the names of most letters end in a vowel with a circumflex accent that will be explained later. Before learning other concepts, it's important to understand the sounds behind the basic letters. Several letters sound the same as in English, like B and F, in the words bola and familia, meaning ball and family. However, some letters can deviate in pronunciation, like D, which in Brazilian Portuguese sounds closer to J in judge. An example is the word dia, meaning day, so it's something to learn about the dialect. Moreover, the letters M, N, P, and T are generally similar to English, but certain vowels can influence the sounds, depending on the dialect. Alongside, some letters behave differently and need special attention, like C and J. These letters can sound hard or soft, depending on the following vowel. When C is placed before A, O, or U, it sounds like K, as in the words carta, copa, cultura. When placed before E or I, it usually sounds like S, as in the words cidade, centro. This sound rule is also true for the letter G. When placed before A, O, or U, it makes a hard G sound, like in gato. When placed before E or I, it makes a soft J, like in gelo. The English equivalent of the sound is J in pleasure, J. Aside from these sounds, the letter H has multiple functions. Typically, the letter is silent when standing alone at the beginning of a word, like in ora. However, its primary function is to act as a modifier, especially when combined with other consonants, like C, L, and N. When combined with these consonants, new sounds are created. C plus H makes the sound sh, like in chave. L plus H makes a soft lie sound, like in filho. N plus H sounds like n in canyon, as in the word niño. Perhaps the most variable letter in Portuguese is R, because depending on position and dialect, it can sound like the English H, a tapped R, or a rolled R. Because this rule is so versatile, it can be hard to understand when to pronounce every variation in a word. In other words, it's a sound rule that must be learned simply by listening to a lot of Portuguese vocabulary, but over time, sound patterns will make it easier to predict how to pronounce the letter. Similar to this rule is the letter S, which can also have several pronunciations depending on position and dialect. In some cases, it may sound like s, salsa, or z, casa. So just like the previous rule, lots of vocabulary and word patterns are needed to predict the pronunciation. Another unpredictable letter is shis, which can sound like sh, s, z, or x. An example is xadrez, meaning chess. So once again, it's a letter that you'll often learn word by word. Before getting to the vowels, there is one last letter, or rather a character that changes pronunciation. Cedilha. This character is not a separate letter, but a symbol that makes the letter se sound like s before a, o, or u, like in the word coração, meaning heart. Without it, the pronunciation would be different, so this character retains etymological history and distinctions in pronunciation. Now, we can analyze the 5 basic vowels in Portuguese: a, e, I, o, u. Unlike English, each vowel generally has a more consistent pronunciation, but the vowels can be open, closed, or nasal, especially with accents. Portuguese uses 4 main accent marks: acute, circumflex, tilde, and grave. Such accents control regular stress rules, so if a Portuguese word has any of these accents, the syllable with the accent will be stressed. Without an accent mark, predictable stress rules usually apply, and this makes Portuguese pronunciation more systematic than English. The acute accent is a small mark that's placed above a vowel, pointing to the right. This accent marks the stress and often indicates an open vowel. Some examples are café, avó. The circumflex accent also marks stress and often indicates a closed vowel, looking like a small triangle. Some examples are você, mes, avó. The difference between the accents is noticeable when 2 words are spelled the same but have 2 different meanings. Avó, avó. Avó means grandmother, but avó means grandfather, so that's the distinction between open and closed vowels. A different accent is the grave accent, a small mark pointing to the left, which does not change pronunciation but indicates the 2 words have combined in writing. In other words, it's a grammatical contraction that marks crasis, which is a fusion of 2 identical vowels. This accent is common when the preposition a, meaning to or at, and the feminine article a are placed together. An example is the saying ir à praia, to go to the beach. When saying this phrase, it's not uniform to pronounce the same vowel sound twice, so Portuguese merges the sounds into one, written as ir à praia, to go to the beach. The last accent to know is the tilde. The tilde can only be placed over the vowels a and o, and it indicates a nasal sound, meaning that air flows through the nose when pronouncing. Some examples are irmã, poe. The tilde tells you that the vowel is nasal, and it's a sound that English naturally doesn't have, so it's something to get used to. The final thing to note in this lesson is the dialectal varieties. In the previous video, I mentioned that Brazilian Portuguese is the main focus of this grammar guide, but European features will be included. Generally, Brazilian Portuguese has clear vowels and speech patterns that are more open, but European Portuguese has reduced unstressed vowels, faster speech patterns, and letters that sound different at the end of syllables. Here, we can quickly examine some of these rules, like unstressed vowels. In a word like telefone, the vowels are fairly audible in the Brazilian variation, but Europeans may pronounce the word like telefone. Another rule is the final O in Brazilian Portuguese. The final O in the word livro is pronounced like a short English livro, livro. The European variation has a more reduced sound, livra, livra. A different rule is the letter S, where in the Brazilian dialect, the letter can sound like S or Z. However, the European dialect can sound like sh, especially at the end of syllables. Similar to this rule is the letter R. In the Brazilian dialect, the letter can have multiple variations, but in Portugal, a guttural R sound is very common. Another rule is the letters D and T. When these letters are placed before E, their sounds become soft, and this difference is frequent in Brazilian Portuguese. Some examples are dia and tio. In Portugal, the sounds remain hard. Dia, tio. The last thing to note regarding dialects is the regional differences within countries. Depending on the place where you would want to speak Portuguese, different regions can have different varieties. And in general, it's something that you learn by building your lexicon and listening to native speakers. Despite these variations, Portuguese speakers across regions can understand each other because, as always, dialects are mutually intelligible. So, this is how the Portuguese alphabet and its letters and sounds work in the language.